tonight.
The narrative that some companies will try to get you to believe is, I've got to take all of your data to make my service better. Well, don't believe that.
There's always politics involved, especially when it comes to the Supreme Court.
FBI agents arrested 4 men today in connection with last year's deadly Unite the Right white supremacist rally in Charlottesville. The men were charged with violating a federal rioting law. Authorities said the group traveled to Charlottesville planning to incite and commit violence. The Trump administration failed to plan for its own zero-tolerance family separation policy and held hundreds of children well past the legal limit. That's according to a report released today by the Department of Homeland Security. Its inspector general found that agents didn't fingerprint or photograph most of the children they took into custody and didn't see evidence that DHS had a database to track them, despite a department announcement to the contrary. Amazon is raising the salaries of its workers in the U.S. to $15 an hour starting in November. The change will impact more than 350,000 employees, including 100,000 seasonal workers. Senator Bernie Sanders, who recently introduced the Stop Bezos Act, praised the world's richest man.
I hope very much that other corporate leaders around the country will follow his example.
The U.S. is denying visas to same-sex partners of diplomats and UN employees unless they're legally married. The move forces those already in the U.S. to get married by the end of the year or leave the country. The State Department says the policy aims to ensure that all couples are treated equally, but critics say it hurts people from countries where same-sex marriage is illegal. On Friday, Facebook announced that hackers broke into almost 50 million users' accounts and may have learned more than just the usual personal details. They stole login tokens that can be used to sign into other sites, from Tinder to Instagram. Facebook says the bug the hackers exploited has been on the site since last July. It's the latest in a string of cyber attacks this year, affecting 150 million people who use a fitness app, 92 million who sent DNA samples to a company for testing, and hundreds of thousands of British Airways customers whose credit card numbers may have been stolen. At one point, Apple CEO Tim Cook called out some of these companies. Now, he's focusing on his own.
7 years into his tenure as Apple CEO, Tim Cook remains a popular guy.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, how are you?
Hey,
Tyler,
great to
nice
see
to meet
you.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Very
Great
nice
to see you.
Especially among Apple fans, especially at an Apple store, and especially after the announcement of the newest iPhone.
Good to see you. Hey.
This sea of admiration is a stark contrast to the current mood toward his tech CEO peers, who've been accused of converting their customers' secrets into a commodity for advertisers. And, as a byproduct, undermining liberal democracy.
Good to see you. How are you? Really good to see you again. How have you been?
Good.
I'm meeting Cook today because he and Apple want to tell you that on this issue, they're not like the other guys.
In March, you said we were maybe past the point where tech companies could regulate themselves in terms of privacy. So what should we do now?
I see privacy as one of the most important issues of the 21st century. We're at a stage now where more information is available about you online and on your phone than there is in your house. You know, chances are your phone knows what you've been browsing, knows your friends, knows your relationships, has all of your photos. I mean, just think about this and the magnitude of information. We take that very seriously. I'm not a pro-regulation kind of person. I believe in the free market deeply. When the free market doesn't produce a result that's great for society, you have to ask yourself, what do we need to do? And I think some level of government regulation is important to come out of that.
And at this time, I'd ask you, please stand, raise your right hand.
You've testified before Congress. How would you rate their literacy in terms of tech and privacy?
I think it's a challenge. I think there is a need to work with Congress and the staff to make sure that we do our jobs of helping them kind of come up to speed on what's possible. Technology itself doesn't want to be good. It doesn't want to be bad. It doesn't want anything. It's up to the creator. I'm exceedingly optimistic that this subject is now in the vocabulary and getting discussed. And now we've got to all figure out a way to take it to the next level and change some things.
Can you give me some specific examples of times when you have chosen user privacy over profit?
Well, that would be a very long list, to be honest with you. I mean,
You can list it.
The way we go into product design, we challenge ourselves to collect as little as possible. And when we collect, we challenge ourselves to make it not identifiable. And we don't do things like we don't read your email, right? We don't read your messages. You are not our product. We're not forming the detailed profile and then allowing other companies to buy the opportunity to target you. That's not the business that we're in.
If you don't use these massive data sets to improve Apple services, are you going to be left behind by your competitors? Are your principles around privacy going to doom Siri to be worse than Alexa?
No. The narrative that some companies will try to get you to believe is, I've got to take all of your data to make my service better. Well, don't believe them. If whoever's telling you that, it's a bunch of bomb. We try to keep as much of your information on that device as possible because we want the device to know, because you count on the device to be smart for you.
In terms of privacy as a human right, does that apply to how you do business in China?
It absolutely does. Encryption for us is the same in every country in the world. We don't design encryption for the US and do it differently everywhere else. It's the same. And so if you send a message in China, it's encrypted. I can't produce the content. I can't produce it in the United States either. If you lock your phone in China, I can't open it. The thing in China that some people have confused is certain countries, and China's one of them, has a requirement that data from local citizens has to be kept in China. We worked with a Chinese company to provide iCloud, but the keys, which is the key, so to speak, pardon the pun, are ours.
But haven't they moved to China, meaning it's much easier for the Chinese government to get to them?
No, I wouldn't get caught up in the where's the location of it. I mean, we have servers located in many different countries in the world. They're not easier to get data from being in one country versus the next. The key question is, how does the encryption process work, and who owns the keys, if anyone? In most cases for us, you and the receiver own the keys.
I am here because there is a concerted effort by the Democratic Party and multinational corporations and big tech to silence conservative and nationalist and populist voices ahead of this critical midterm election.
So I want to move from one part of the Bill of Rights to another, freedom of speech.
Yep.
How did you decide to ban Alex Jones?
What users want from us, and what we've always provided them, is a curated platform. We think that what the user wants is someone that does review these apps, someone that does review the podcast, someone that on like Apple News, where a human is selecting the top stories. And that's what we do. We don't take a political stand. We're not leaning one way or the other. You can tell that from the stuff on the App Store and in podcasts, et cetera. You'll see everything from very conservative to very liberal. And that's the way I think it should be.
But at what point were you like, okay, that's it, Alex Jones has to go?
I don't really get into a singular kind of event, but I think there's enough there that reasonable people could agree that if you're going to curate, that should be off.
Did you coordinate with other tech companies to kick off Alex Jones?
No. I've never even had a conversation about this with any tech company.
Why not?
But why?
We make our thing.
but we make our decisions independently. And I think that's important. Honestly, I've had no conversation, and to my knowledge, no one at Apple has.
You seem like a very nice guy, and your commitment to privacy is very admirable, but you also run a $1 trillion company, which is another way of saying you have a lot of power. So what happens if you change your mind? Or the person who comes after you doesn't agree with you?
Well, first of all, we don't really think of ourselves as a $1 trillion company, just to be clear. In terms of power, I've never felt like I had any power. That's not how I look and think about the world. In privacy, I guess I would say this. If you look back at what Steve said, I think you would find a tape. I know I saw one the other day that was probably 10 years old or so.
Privacy means people know what they're signing up for in plain English and repeatedly.
That's a pretty simple kind of view, which I think is profound. This is our company. This is how we think, the royal we. This is our culture. And so I think the next person, I don't want to commit them, but I can't imagine it. It's not in my imagination that somebody would just say, oh, time to change. I don't see it.
It will be dependent on what comes back from the FBI. The FBI is working. They're working very hard, and let's see what happens. Peter?
On the scale of Donald Trump reactions, his response to the Kavanaugh blowup has been surprisingly measured.
I thought her testimony was very compelling, and she looks like a very fine woman to me. Very fine woman.
That's not the kind of restraint we're used to seeing from the president when he wants a win. And it's also not what Democrats are doing. So far, they're not waiting for the FBI. They're going all in. Over the past week, a handful of Democrats have turned Kavanaugh into the center of their fundraising pitch. Kamala Harris, a potential 2020 presidential candidate, has blasted out 3,600 anti-Kavanaugh ads on Facebook, according to a Wall Street Journal analysis. Ads that link to a donation page. And over the weekend, Nancy Pelosi sent out a fundraising email saying the Republicans' response to Kavanaugh's testimony made her sick. Adrienne Elrod, a veteran Democratic strategist, says this is just smart politics.
I think it's important that you show this base that you are willing to fight against this and do everything you can. I think that's very important to motivating and exciting the base, and the Democratic Party base does not want Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court.
So far, that seems to be working. Act Blue, a progressive group, says it raised more money this quarter than it did in all of 2014, although it was already an unusually strong fundraising period, even before Kavanaugh. Republicans are also worked up over Kavanaugh, and earlier today, a Republican official told Politico that the National Republican Congressional Committee saw its donations go up 175% in the past week. One Republican strategist I spoke to says they're looking in particular at one of the key constituencies that Democrats hope to win, centrist suburban women, who they think might see in Kavanaugh an example of what could happen to their own husbands or sons. Trump seemed to be trying out some version of that appeal today.
Well, I say that it's a very scary time for young men in America when you can be guilty of something that you may not be guilty of.
All of the calculations going on here are pretty cynical. After all, this is a situation that started out with a report of sexual assault, and it involves the highest court of the land. But it's also the final days before an election that both parties see as existential. Now it's go time.
35 days from the midterms. This is go time. There's a very careful needle to thread. You don't want to make it seem like any of your actions are purely politically motivated, but of course there's always politics involved, and especially when it comes to the Supreme Court.
Pundits looking ahead to the midterms have focused on whether candidates can flip districts. But this November, voters in 38 states will also decide directly on more than 150 new laws or changes to their constitutions. Ballot initiatives and referendums can come from a legislature, but most are grassroots efforts led by voters with clipboards. which is why they don't always seem to address the most pressing issues. For example, California will decide whether to keep clocks on daylight savings time year-round, something only Arizona and Hawaii do so far. And Missouri will see if Olympic winners deserve another prize, an exemption on taxes for cash awards. And speaking of taxes, Nevada might join a growing list of states to ban taxes on tampons and other feminine hygiene products, while Oregon and Washington could decide to stop taxing something everyone needs, groceries. Then there are the states trying to pass laws that a newly conservative Supreme Court could be amenable to, like Alabama, which will vote on whether to again display the Ten Commandments on public property. In 2003, a federal court order forced the state to remove a Ten Commandments display from a state judicial building. For the same reason, it and 2 other states are also considering pro-life measures, either by defining the sanctity of the unborn or blocking the states from funding abortions. Other ballot proposals seem fueled by anger at Washington's lack of policy reform. Voters in 7 states are trying ballot initiatives or referendums as a way to hold politicians to account. New Mexico will decide whether to create an ethics commission that would investigate state officials and candidates. Missouri is considering a bill that would cap how much congressmen could accept from lobbyists. And South Dakota may ban certain out-of-state donations. In the face of an attorney general who opposes any kind of marijuana use,
I'm of the general view that this is not a healthy substance.
4 states are voting on different shades of legalization. The number of states that allow recreational weed use could hit 11, and those allowing medicinal or recreational use, 32. That's nearly 2/3 of the map. With virtually no movement in Congress on replacing the Affordable Care Act, 4 states will try to take advantage of the law by expanding who can get Medicaid. And as the EPA rolls back controls, several states are proposing stricter environmental rules or ways to encourage a switch to renewable energy. Alaska is one of those states, but its initiative to protect the environment is proving controversial.
Alaska catches nearly 2/3 of the nation's seafood and also holds some of the largest oil and mineral reserves in the United States. But these resources often come into conflict, and in November, Alaskans might have to choose between these industries and the jobs that they provide. Morgan Jones has been a commercial fisherman in Homer, Alaska for nearly 20 years.
Just kind of stay off the beach, it's pretty shallow.
Fishing the same waters as his father and grandfather. But recently he's been worried about the Pebble Mine, a massive open-pit mine project proposed in Bristol Bay, where Jones catches most of his salmon. The mine company says their years of scientific studies show that salmon runs won't be affected. Jones doesn't buy it.
How big of a threat is open pit mining to what you guys do?
Just from start to finish, the open pit and habitat loss, the tailings that we have to control, the road that they want to build, the port they want to build, the dredging they want to do. Yeah, that's destructive. Salmon can't survive in that atmosphere.
That's why Alaskan fishermen have pushed Ballot Measure 1, or Prop 1, onto November's ticket. It would create some of the nation's strongest regulations on mining and oil and gas extraction in order to protect Alaska's salmon runs, which have been declining in recent years.
We're fishermen and this is our livelihood again, and we want to see some protection for this kind of shaky regulatory place we're at.
But Alaska already has some of the nation's strongest protections for salmon and other fish. Prop 1 would make them even stronger. As things stand, the state has to prove that a big project would impact healthy salmon waterways. If Prop 1 passes, the roles reverse, and the project would have to prove the habitat is not home to salmon, a drastic change to current regulation. That's why major oil and mining companies have poured nearly $10 million into convincing Alaskans across the state to vote no, including here at the Alaska State Fair.
Hi, folks. Have you heard about Ballot Measure 1? I've heard about Ballot Measure 1.
You guys heard about Ballot Measure 1? It's a complete rewrite of our fish habitat regulations, and we think it's going to do some real damage to our economy.
Alaska has the highest unemployment rate in the country. Opponents say this measure could make that problem worse by killing high-paying mining jobs. Mike Sater is a former miner and works for the largest silver mine in the United States.
Well, I can tell you, I work in a mine down in Southeast Alaska. This stops us in our tracks. Our next expansion that we're getting ready to do, keep employing 430 people, it stops.
Mining and oil and gas account for around 15,000 direct jobs in Alaska. The salmon industry alone creates nearly twice as many, but the campaign is still being outspent 10-1.
The campaign against Stand for Salmon is mainly sponsored by Pebble Partnership, BP, ConocoPhillips, Donalyn, those kind of large extractive industry in our state that want things to remain business as usual.
So it's the other people are inside, they're the no?
Yeah, they're the no. We're the yes.
We're the yes. We're the local. We live here. These are our fish.
We really believe it's time that we take proactive steps in order to protect our habitat, as our salmon runs are really declining rapidly right now.
We're not losing jobs. We're not shutting down no more roads. No.
Industry is basically saying that you guys are taking a wrecking ball to something that could be done with a fly swatter, that this is going to affect the entire state in unforeseen ways.
I don't believe that there's any project that would come to a halt, but it has to be certain guidelines and it has to be in the right area.
Prop 1's potential costs haven't been independently studied yet, but opponents argue they'd be impossible to measure.
You know, you look at some of these projects that are on the horizon for us in Alaska, and it would just be a deal killer.
Kara Moriarty represents some of the biggest names in oil and gas, including BP, ExxonMobil, and ConocoPhillips. These companies pay nearly $2 billion a year just in taxes to the state of Alaska.
Part of the argument is that if there's a problem and it destroys a watershed, destroys salmon habitat, how do you get them to trust you?
So I don't think there's anything that we can say or evidence to show them of our amazing track record that's going to give them enough confidence that we do operate in an environmentally safe manner.
There hasn't been a major oil or mining disaster in Alaska since Exxon Valdez in 1989, an incident blamed for nearly wiping out entire species of fish. Mining opponents also point to acid drainage from the Tulsequa Chief Mine, which closed over 60 years ago but still threatens nearly $10 million a year worth of salmon habitat. The proposed Pebble Mine would be more heavily regulated than the Tulsequa, and extraction technology has improved since its closure. But for Morgan Jones, any mining is too big a risk.
Salmon streams don't recover. That's the whole point of the ballot measure. Salmon streams take years and years and years to recover from these disruptions.
So part of the point is there's no going back.
Right. I mean, once you dig up a salmon nest, it's gone. You know, once you dig up a gravel pit, it's gone. And it's not like you can relay a place where salmon can spawn.
Today, Tesla announced that it churned out more than 80,000 cars in the last quarter, including more than 50,000 of its troubled Model 3s. Almost double the number that came off the line last quarter. And a bit of good news for a company that's failed to meet production target after production target. Still, the number is slightly under what CEO Elon Musk promised. That bluster also got Musk in trouble over the weekend, when he was forced to pay up for what may be the most expensive tweet of all time.
Watching Tesla CEO Elon Musk use Twitter is sort of like watching a slow-motion car crash. And this weekend, Musk's tweeting caught up with him when he settled a securities fraud case with the Securities and Exchange Commission for $20 million. Musk sent the tweet back in August, saying he was ready to take Tesla private. It sent the company's stock price up by 11%. But within days, it became clear Musk hadn't secured the funding at all. He'd had a few conversations with the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia.
We alleged that Musk had arrived at the price of $420 by assuming a 20% premium over Tesla's then existing share price, and then rounding up to $420 because of the significance of that number in marijuana culture and his belief that his girlfriend would be amused by it.
So why would Musk send a tweet that's so obviously untrue and illegal? It's probably because he was lashing out against the bane of his existence, Tesla short sellers. Tesla is the most shorted company in the world, meaning lots of people are betting the company's stock price will fall. They're doing this because they think Tesla's stock price is extremely overvalued. And they may have a point. Tesla isn't profitable, but it's somehow more valuable than other American car manufacturers that have more than 10 times the revenue.
It is being afforded what I believe is a ridiculous valuation for an automaker. The market is describing it a valuation as if it's a technology company, and it's not. It's a car company.
Irons, who says he invests with his own money, declined to disclose just how much money he's put against Tesla, but has said publicly that it represents a low single-digit percentage of his portfolio. Irons actively touts his short position on Twitter. The shorts aren't just betting against Tesla. Anytime Tesla fails to hit a production goal or misses its earning targets, the shorts are there crowing about Musk's failure. Even so, the shorts don't have any real leverage. They're basically just gadflies. So all Musk had to do was ignore them. But that's exactly what he couldn't do. If Musk had been successful in taking Tesla private at $420, he would have crushed the shorts. And that seems to be his primary motivation in making the proposal. The SEC settlement is really just a slap on the wrist for Musk. Musk has to pay a $20 million fine, which is around 0.093% of his net worth. He will have to resign as chairman of the board, but gets to remain as CEO. But Tesla does have to hire an experienced securities lawyer to approve all of Musk's Tesla-related tweets.
So some people are short this company because of Elon Musk, not just because of the financials, not just because they think it's not a viable business, but also because they think that Musk is a reckless CEO. So as a short seller, I don't necessarily think it's the worst thing in the world that he's staying on as CEO.
On the news of the settlement, Tesla's stock price jumped almost 20%, but it's still well below where it was after Musk sent the infamous tweet, which means his attack on short sellers made a lot of money for the shorts.